I lived on the farm with my grandparents, and we had a dog. Her name was Spitha, which means spark, like a spark coming off of a fire, because a spark is very fast, and she was fast, and so they call her Spitha. We had chickens and a couple horses and a few goats. Let's see what else. Maybe a donkey. And we had lots of fruit trees surrounding the house. My favorite, the fresh fig trees, and also cactus pear, which I really look forward to finding in the grocery stores here in the U.S. In the spring and summertime. And it was very hot in southern Greece. It's hot most of the time. I hadn't really seen snow. I think it had snowed one time, and it was almost like cotton candy falling out of the sky, and by the time it would hit the ground, it would melt. So there was, I don't think there was any accumulation, but I do remember we were visiting a particular person's house, and my grandfather and I were there, and my grandmother, and it started to snow, and so we wanted to leave. And there were other people there as well. I think there was just a house visit or something. And when we left, we didn't have any coats, and it was snowing outside. And so I remember they gave us a sheet to put over us, and to get home, because no one wore coats. It's a warm climate there, and never seen snow. But that was the only time I'd ever seen snow before I moved to the U.S. And like I said before, it would melt. It was melting before it hit the ground, but it was beautiful and white. I remember it was very light and puffy. Yeah.
Now, how was food cooked at your house? Where'd you guys get water? Because I know you didn't have running water.
We had a well, and you had to pump the water from the well. And fresh vegetables were grown in the garden. We had a huge garden right in front of the house. Whatever we grew in the spring, summer, and fall, then you would can goods to last you through the winter, and you would you would just do a lot of preserving of fruit in jars and things like that. And food in terms of like meat. We had a goat. We had a little goat, so every now and then we would have a goat, and then when they would kill the goat, there was a lot of meat there, so you would preserve it and freeze it for a later time. And
how'd you freeze it? With salt?
They would preserve it in these little ice boxes, and they did use a lot of salt to preserve it, but they would also share it with the other siblings. Mm-hmm. So if you were to kill a sheep, it was a goat. I mean, it was a big job, and so you would get help from your brother or your sister or your cousin or whatever, and then they would take some of it home as well. So really, you didn't really have a lot left over.
Mm-hmm. And how did you cook it?
They would roast it in an outdoor brick oven, similar to the one that you find at Bertucci's. You would have to fire up the oven early in the morning by putting large branches in there and heating up the oven to high temperature, and then you would prepare and season the meat and put it in a roasting pan, and then you put it in the oven and let it roast all day, or however many hours it took. Same way they baked bread, same way you would make homemade bread, and then you would form the loaves and put them in the outdoor oven, and you cook them, and you would make bread every week, enough to last you for the whole week. It wasn't like you had a grocery store down the street to go buy these things. You got your milk from your cow, you got your eggs from your chickens, you made your own bread, and we'd also have chicken every now and then. My grandmother would go and catch a chicken, she'd kill it, and the thing would run around with its head cut off. And then it would just kind of drop dead eventually. And we had fresh oranges on the property and clementines and other fruit as well. Grapes, lots of grapes. So it was good, all
Now,
fresh stuff.
Was there ever like a town spirit involved? Was there like town like?
We used to have fairs,
Unity.
town fairs, and town celebrations. There were also, there was the time of the harvest. I remember in the fall when the wheat would be harvested, everybody would bring their wheat to the central location near my little town school. And there everybody would process their wheat. And it's not processing by machines and chemicals and whatnot. It was all manual processing. It was thrashing of the wheat to get it off of the branch, and then to collect it in large piles, and then to move it from there. They would weigh the amount of wheat that was produced by your wheat branches, and then you would bring that to a flour plant where they would grind the wheat down to flour, and then you'd get it home in big sacks. You would be given your amount of wheat, the flour, and you'd bring it home and you store it, and that's what you made bread with.
Now, on the topic of town unity or town spirit, was there like a soccer team that was represented by the town?
No.
Because I know
In modern times now, yes, but back then, people did not indulge in sports events and things like that. It was just a very simple life. People were just trying to make a living on their farm, and there were no televisions, so you couldn't watch professional sporting events on television. We had a radio, and I guess you could hear the games on the radio, but my grandparents never listened to that kind of stuff. My grandfather used to listen to the news on the radio and listen to music, but I don't recall ever listening to a soccer game.
now besides like the feast day of the patron saint of like the town's church, was there another, like during say like the great harvest or the fall harvest, was there also dancing?
Yeah, after the fall harvest was all done and everybody's wheat was processed, there was a big celebration by like a big bonfire would be started to actually burn the branches from that the wheat was taken from. And I remember it being an annual big event. Everybody would congregate there, and it was a lot of work for your wheat to be processed. And a lot of time and effort went into you carting it back and forth where you needed to bring it to. There was also, the harvest of the fruit. Like, we used to have a lot of pear trees. And I remember we had so many pears that they would go to the market. But big trucks would come with empty boxes and individual spaces for all the pears to be dropped in. And so we would, my grandparents would harvest their pears and bring it to the town center. And the trucks would be there to for you to put them in the boxes in each individual slots in the boxes, and then the boxes were loaded onto the big truck and taken into the town to be sold to market. A different town, much bigger town.
And last question, what were like a couple of the biggest holidays in the town? Like what was celebrated most?
The biggest town celebration was Aia Paraskivi, Saint Paraskivi, which was the patron saint of the town. There was a small chapel or church up on top of the hill, one of the higher points of the town, dedicated to the saint. And every year on this patron saint's day, there would be a fair in the town, and there would be a dance, and there would be food, and everybody would congregate in the town center, and you'd see everybody dressed nice, and you order dinner out, and there would be a live band playing music and all that kind of stuff.
What about like more nationally recognized holidays?
I don't recall. We didn't have television, and so I was not aware of national celebrations. I'm sure there was, and my grandfather probably would listen to them on the radio, but I don't recall.
No, like Christmas and Easter.
Now, again, we didn't travel outside of our town very much. We just celebrated within our own town each of the holidays.
Mm-hmm. No, did you celebrate Christmas and Easter at all, or?
Yes, we did. But they were all mainly church holidays, and they were celebrated for its meaning, unlike how we celebrate Christmas here with lots of presents and glitter.
No presents exchanged over there?
Not on Christmas, no. We used to get money on New Year's Day. There was no exchange of presents. We didn't even decorate a Christmas tree. That wasn't a custom in the 60s or probably most of the 70s in the area that I lived in Greece. That came into play later on when the U.S. influenced Greece. Later on, probably in the later 70s, possibly 80s.
Now, do you still keep in touch with relatives that left behind, that stayed behind?
Yes, I do. I am in contact with my aunt and my first cousins and their children that are living there. The cousins and I'm friends with on Facebook actually, and see what's going on in their lives. And certainly they are growing up in a totally different Greece than I grew up in.
All right, Mom. Thank you again.
You're welcome.